What would you do if someone laughed in your face? For knowing your worth? The conference room was silent except for the sound of Bradley Cole, the hiring manager, laughing like I'd told a joke. "You're declining our offer. Good luck finding something better," he said, throwing his head back so dramatically his tie hit the back of his chair. His colleagues chuckled behind their coffee cups, exchanging those smug glances that sting worse than words. I held my portfolio tighter. My throat was dry, but my voice stayed firm. I've spent 8 years building expertise in rare earth material recycling. This offer doesn't reflect market value. Bradley cut me off, tapping my resume like it offended him. "We've got 20 candidates who jump at this number. Maybe you've overestimated your importance." Something snapped. I stood up, smoothed my navy dress, locked eyes with him. "No, I haven't. But you certainly have underestimated it." I turned, walked out. The laughter followed me like static. 3 weeks of interviews just to end like that. Back in my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, sweat cooling on my skin. 2 weeks until rent, savings draining like water through a cracked pipe. I just turned down the only offer on the table, and still something inside me whispered, "Good. You did the right thing." But what I didn't know then was this: within 72 hours, everything would change. Before I explain how that moment of humiliation became the turning point of my entire career, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated so completely it made your heart pound? Have you ever sat across from someone who saw your resume and still didn't see you? That fire you felt, don't let it go out. Hold on to it. Because this isn't just a story about me walking out of a job offer. It's a story about refusing to stay silent, about knowing your worth in a world that profits from your silence. My name is Dr. Camila Rivera, and 6 months ago, I was the invisible mind behind one of the biggest breakthroughs in rare earth material recycling technology, a method that cut extraction costs by 42% while increasing purity yields by over 40%. It made the cover of 3 industry magazines. It changed how the sector viewed post-consumer waste. It was my process. And yet when it was presented to the world at the annual Earth Resources Conference, it was my boss Meredith Shaw standing on stage, taking all the credit. I sat in the 4th row, hands folded in my lap, watching her say phrases I'd coined, displaying data from experiments I'd conducted alone on weekends in a damp lab with malfunctioning filtration equipment. Her name in bold on the projection screen. My name not even in the footnotes. That night in my hotel room, I made myself a promise: never again. Never again would I let someone else benefit from my brilliance while I played silent support. Never again would I be the quiet Latina woman who worked hard while others took the spotlight. Never again would I confuse humility with invisibility. I was raised in Ann Arbor, Michigan, the daughter of 2 Puerto Rican public school teachers. My parents taught me that excellence speaks for itself. That hard work is its own reward. Let your work be your voice, my father always said. But in this world, sometimes silence is exactly what they're counting on. Weeks later, I got the email from Greenword Technologies, a green disruptor in the sustainable manufacturing space. They were hiring for a director of materials innovation, the kind of role that only gets posted once every few years. Their recruitment process, intense. 3 technical interviews, 1 45-minute presentation on molecular separation theory, meetings with 5 department heads, hours of behavioral assessments. But I aced every step. Bradley Cole, the hiring manager, even nodded and took notes during my presentation. He shook my hand at the end and said, "You've got one of the most impressive portfolios we've seen." So when the offer finally came in, I opened the email expecting fireworks. Instead, a wet match. The salary was $21,000 lower than industry average for my specialty. For a senior-level role requiring 8 years of specialized experience, it was barely above what I earned as a mid-level researcher. Still, I didn't react emotionally. I did what women in STEM have to do over and over. I got the data. I prepped for negotiation. I rehearsed my talking points. I walked into that conference room with numbers, projections, market benchmarks. What I wasn't prepared for was mockery. You seriously believe you're worth that? Bradley laughed. He said it like I was a toddler asking for candy at a board meeting. That moment, the smirks, the eye rolls, the way he weaponized my ambition, it branded something into me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't arrogant. I wasn't asking for a favor. I was asking for what I'd earned. When I left the building, I didn't cry. Not yet. But when I got home to my one-bedroom apartment and heated up leftover arroz, con gandules from my fridge, the exhaustion hit me like a freight train. My phone buzzed. It was my sister Natalie. How'd it go? I stared at the screen. Couldn't type. Eventually I called. Told her everything. She paused for a beat, then sighed. Camilla? I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself, but rent's due soon. I know. Just maybe call them back tomorrow. Say you changed your mind. You can't negotiate when you're homeless. I almost considered it. But then I remembered Meredith on that stage. I remembered Bradley laughing. I remembered what it felt like to be invisible. No, I wasn't going back. That night, I applied to 14 new positions, updated my professional profiles, and wrote out a savings plan. 53 days. That's how long I could survive if I cut out everything but rent, utilities, and protein powder. Not ideal, but possible. And I'd survived worse. But what happened next I couldn't have planned if I tried. 3 days. That's how long it took for the tide to turn. On the third afternoon, while I was prepping for an upcoming interview, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. Hello, this is Camilla. There was a pause, then a calm, deliberate voice responded. Dr. Rivera. This is Marcus Caldwell, CEO of Greenword Technologies. My spine straightened. I hadn't met him during the hiring process. He hadn't sat in on any interviews, hadn't even been copied on the offer letter. And yet here he was calling me directly. I heard you turn down our offer. That's rare. I stayed quiet. After you left, our engineers revisited your presentation, especially the lithium extraction method. Our projections were off. It's more valuable than we realized. Far more. He let the words hang. Miss Rivera, are you still there? I'm here, I said. Calm, controlled. We'd like to discuss bringing you on board under terms that reflect your value. What would it take? I'd thought about that question 1,000 times. Not just for Greenword, for every company that ever treated me like I was lucky to be in the room. So I answered 3 things. 1, market rate compensation, plus 15%. 2, authority to lead the materials division with full research autonomy. 3, implementation of a transparent salary system across all departments, eliminating gender and racial disparities. There was silence on the line, then a quiet exhale. The first 2 are doable. The third, that's unconventional. So is laughing at a woman who knows her worth, I replied. Yet here we are. You're asking for salary transparency across an entire company. Yes, with special attention to the historical underpayment of women and minorities in STEM. Another pause. Longer this time. I'll speak with the board, Marcus said. Can I call you back tomorrow? Of course, I said, and I meant it, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't chasing them. They were chasing me. 10 minutes later, my inbox pinged. An email from Bradley Cole. Ms. Rivera, I understand you spoke with Mr. Caldwell. I'd like to reopen our discussion. The production team is eager to move forward with your process. We cannot meet deadlines without your expertise. If you have terms you'd like to propose, I'd be happy to discuss. No apology, just panic disguised as professionalism. I didn't reply. The next day, Marcus called again. The board has agreed with one condition. We'll implement salary transparency gradually over 6 months to review current contracts. Would that be acceptable? I paused. That was more than I expected. Far more than most companies would ever offer. Yes, I said, but I'd like to be directly involved in the review process. Agreed. We'll begin drafting the contract today. By the time we hung up, I had a signing bonus large enough to cover 6 months of rent, my new role Director of Materials Innovation with a private lab and full authority. 2 weeks later, I walked into Greenwood, not as a candidate, as a leader. My office overlooked the city skyline. The company badge clipped to my blazer felt different this time, earned not requested. On my first day, I asked HR for the compensation data for my division. They hesitated. I reminded them of the agreement. By noon, a spreadsheet hit my inbox, and what I saw confirmed every suspicion I'd carried for years. Women in my department made 22% less than their male peers. Employees with Hispanic or Asian surnames earned 18% less on average. The longer someone had been loyal, the less they made. Experience, performance, loyalty, none of it mattered as much as who knew how to play the negotiation game. That evening, I sat alone in my new lab staring at the data. Then I started to plan. Friday afternoon, I called a department meeting. 57 employees filed into the conference room, Bradley included, still smug, still stiff in his seat. Except now he reported to me. I stood at the front of the room. Thank you for the warm welcome this week. Before we dive into project timelines, I want to talk about something bigger. I clicked to the first slide. Salary data anonymized, visualized. This is what our department's compensation structure looks like today. Names removed, just numbers. And as you can see, the silence was heavy. Everyone leaned forward. We're not paying people based on skill or experience. We're paying based on how loud they are. That ends now. I outlined our roadmap, transparent salary bands, objective promotion metrics, equity reviews every 6 months. I made eye contact with Bradley. Bias, intentional or not, has shaped this team's history, but not its future. If this story resonates with you so far, hit that like button and subscribe, because part 3. That's when the resistance begins, the quiet sabotage, the war behind the glass walls. And I promise you, you haven't seen anything yet. It started with a whisper. Then came the resistance. On Monday morning, I walked into the building like any other day, coffee in one hand, to-do list in the other. But something felt off. My access badge didn't work on the main lab doors. Security had no record of any changes. I called Anya Delgado, the analyst who'd been helping me gather salary data. She let me in through the side entrance, eyes wide with concern. "It's getting worse," she whispered. "Our server access was locked out last night. We lost half the simulation files. I didn't panic. Backups." Julian mirrored everything to a secure cloud after week 2. I nodded. "Good. Let's act like we're starting from scratch. I want to see how far they'll go." At 2 p.m., an emergency department meeting was called, scheduled by Bradley, of course, and conveniently scheduled during my pre-planned call with a key supplier. When I walked in late, he was already at the front of the room. So based on resource limitations, we'll be placing Dr. Rivera's project on hold until further review. Hold. I stepped forward slowly. That's interesting, especially since the board approved expedited funding just last week. Bradley didn't flinch. There was preliminary approval, yes. But as COO, I've decided a temporary pause is necessary. COO. That explained his obsession with control. "And does Marcus Caldwell know you're reversing a board decision?" I asked, keeping my tone calm. "Mr. Caldwell understands the complexities of production management." That's when I pulled out my trump card. "Actually, I just signed a supplier contract this morning with his signature. Deliveries start next Monday." Gasps rippled through the room. Bradley's jaw tightened. I turned to the staff. "Let's talk about the actual plan moving forward." I walked the team through every implementation detail, showed the Gantt chart, assigned roles, set deadlines. Bradley said nothing, just clenched his tablet with white-knuckled fury. At the end of the meeting, he caught me by the door. "You've made a serious miscalculation," he said, voice low. "This company thrived long before you got here. No one is irreplaceable." I met his gaze. Calm. Steady. "That's where you're wrong, Bradley. Some people are irreplaceable. The trick is, knowing which ones. The sabotage escalated. Orders disappeared. Meeting invites went missing. Important emails were accidentally buried in massive CC threads. But we anticipated every move. Julian Park, our chemical engineer, kept logs of every delay. Lena Joe, our lab tech, rerouted missing materials using her own contacts. Anya, she tracked everything time-stamped, documented bulletproof. We converted a dusty supply closet into a secondary test space, worked late, came in early, launched simulations while the office slept, and then 6 weeks in we had our first official prototype test. The results shocking. 37% increase in rare earth recovery, 44% reduction in chemical waste, ROI projections in the millions. We presented the data to the executive team. Marcus Caldwell was beaming. Board members scribbled notes like it was gold. Only Bradley stayed silent, flipping through our presentation with visible disdain. The results are promising, he said finally, but retooling our lines would be costly, risky. Actually, I replied, pulling up a new spreadsheet, we've already accounted for retooling training and a 15% contingency buffer. ROI within 9 months. Savings projected at $12 million annually. Bradley's face flushed. Implementation still disrupts the main line, which is why I said, cueing the next slide, we begin on the auxiliary line with only 2 48-hour pauses in main production. The full Gantt chart is in your folders. The board approved it unanimously. Marcus clapped me on the back after the meeting. This is why we hired you. I smiled, but inside I was burning. Because behind every line of code, every calculation, every sleepless night was a war of attrition I hadn't signed up for. And Bradley wasn't done fighting. The very next morning, my key card didn't work again. When I arrived, the lab was locked. Access revoked, no explanation. Lena had to sneak me in again. They've shut us out of the server too, she whispered. But don't worry, Anya's got everything backed up again. I didn't say a word, just opened my laptop and started documenting. Every block, every delay, every backdoor sabotage. I wanted it all in writing, because if Bradley thought I wouldn't fight him with his own tactics, he had no idea who he was up against. The company's quarterly town hall meeting had always been routine, until now. It was the one time every department head addressed the entire company, hundreds of employees gathered in the main auditorium, eyes forward, expectations low. But this time, the tension was electric. I was scheduled last. Bradley Cole, of course, was slotted right before me. He took the stage smug and smooth. Operations has seen tremendous success this quarter, he began. We've implemented several key efficiencies across production lines. I listened carefully, and as expected, he took credit for 3 innovations that came directly from my team, not even subtle. He described Henri's bottleneck fix like it was his idea, glossed over the extraction method results like they were a group effort from operations, didn't mention a single member of materials innovation by name. When it was my turn, I walked to the podium slowly, calm, collected, deadly. Before I share our division's progress, I'd like to correct a few misunderstandings from the previous presentation. The room shifted. I clicked to my first slide. Side-by-side photos of the production line modification Bradley had just claimed. This redesign was proposed and executed by Dr. Julian Park, who's sitting right there. The extraction optimization that was developed by Lena Joe and her sub-team, and the waste processing overhaul credit goes to Anya Delgado. One by one, I returned the spotlight to its rightful owners, and when I reached the financial slide, $14.2 million in projected savings. The audience sat in stunned silence, then applause. But I wasn't done. There's one more initiative I'd like to share today. I clicked to a graph labeled Compensation Equity Review, Phase 1 Results. Over the last 6 weeks, we've analyzed pay discrepancies across departments. I explained the methodology, market benchmarks, internal comparisons, historical bias adjustments, and starting this cycle, 87 employees will receive compensation adjustments, retroactive to the beginning of Q2. The audience erupted. People turned to each other in disbelief. Some stood up in applause. I scanned the room, faces lit with something I hadn't seen before hope. From the corner of my eye, I saw Bradley slip out through a side door. The next morning, Marcus called me to his office. Inside sat Bradley, arms crossed, expression tight, and the HR director. Dr. Rivera Marcus began tone formal. Bradley has raised concerns about your leadership style. I didn't flinch. Bradley jumped in. She's undermining the chain of command. She's created a parallel power structure. Employees bypass department protocols and report directly to her. I see, I said, pulling out my tablet. Before we proceed, I'd like to share a few items. I connected to the display. Slide 1, timeline of obstruction. Revoked access logs. Deleted meeting invites. Mysteriously delayed equipment. Slide 2, video clips. Bradley taking credit for projects he never touched. Slide 3, internal emails. Messages where he explicitly told staff to stall board-approved implementations. The room went silent. Each incident may seem isolated, I said, but the pattern is unmistakable. Bradley flushed. This is ridiculous. Those are taken out of context, and yet I said they exist, and several recipients forwarded them unsolicited. Marcus leaned back in his chair, slowly, processing. Bradley, is this accurate? She manipulated the staff. She went over my head, demanded outrageous terms which have since saved us $14 million Marcus cut in, while cutting turnover in half. Bradley surged forward. This company worked just fine before she got here. I stared him down, and it nearly lost its edge because of that comfort. That afternoon, a company-wide email went out. Leadership update effective. Immediately, Bradley Cole will transition to an advisory role. The operations division will report directly to the CEO until a replacement is identified. The next morning, Marcus called me in again. I have a proposal for you. He slid a single sheet across the desk. Executive Vice President of Innovation and Operations. Double the division. Full control. The salary figure made me blink. You've rebuilt a broken culture, Camilla, he said, and I want you to lead what comes next. 6 months after that humiliating interview, I stood in the very same conference room where Bradley once laughed in my face, this time at the head of the table. But now the chairs were different. The lighting was brighter, and the air no longer held the weight of silence. Our salary bands were published and public. Employee advancement pathways were standardized. Innovation flourished because respect had been restored. And when a nervous new hire named Maya Lin approached me after a meeting to say, Dr. Rivera, I joined this company because of what you did. I smiled. Then never let anyone tell you what you're worth. You define that, not them. The notification came through on a quiet Thursday morning. I was sipping my second coffee reviewing onboarding reports for 3 new hires when my phone buzzed. Market alert: Allied Earthworks stock drops 30% following major investor withdrawal. I stared at the headline. Allied Earthworks, my former employer, the company where Meredith Shaw stood on stage with a smile and presented my work as her own, the company that printed press releases with her name. That smiled for cameras while I stayed invisible. That sent me a generic thank you email after I left with no mention of the research I built from scratch. I tapped into the full article. Insiders cite an inability to match recent advances in rare earth material recovery. New competitors, notably Greenwood Technologies, have outpaced Allied's extraction capabilities. The paragraph that followed, it mentioned me by name. Greenwood's process, led by Dr. Camila Rivera, has become an industry benchmark for cost-effective rare earth recycling, not buried in a citation, not in parentheses under someone else's name, mine. I exhaled slowly. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like correction. The world was finally catching up. 3 days later, a message arrived in my inbox. Subject: long time no see from Meredith Shaw, Camilla. I hope you're doing well. I saw the latest coverage on Greenword and wanted to reach out. I think we got off on the wrong foot. There may be an opportunity for collaboration. Let me know if you're open to a conversation. I'd love to catch up. Meredith. I stared at the screen. My hands didn't move. No reply. I just hit archive. That weekend, I took a walk through downtown with my sister Natalie. We passed a storefront with a magazine cover in the window, Green Tech Weekly, how Dr. Rivera quietly revolutionized the industry. Natalie pointed and grinned. Think Dad would have believed it? Our father, who once told me that science is a hard path for a girl like you. I smiled. He always said, let your work be your voice. Well, she said, looping her arm through mine, it's about damn time the world started listening. Back at the office Monday, I called a meeting with my leadership team. Anya, Julian, Lena, 3 of the most brilliant people I've ever worked with. This next phase isn't just about efficiency, I told them. It's about legacy, building systems that outlast us, that empower the next wave. They nodded, because they understood. This wasn't just about me getting justice. It was about making sure no one after me had to go through what I did. 2 months later, we launched the Rivera Fellowship, a paid research program for underrepresented students in sustainable engineering. Applications flooded in. One from a 19-year-old girl in Puerto Rico. She wrote, "No one at my school takes chemistry seriously, but I saw your story. Now I know it's possible. I read her essay 3 times, then called HR. Let's make sure she gets in." Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's refusing to disappear. It's building something so powerful, so undeniable, that the very people who erased you have no choice but to acknowledge you. And if you're still watching, let me ask, has anyone ever taken credit for your work? Ever made you question your worth just because you refuse to be silent? Tell me in the comments, because if this story resonated with you, it's not just entertainment. It's your permission slip to speak up, to walk away, to demand more, to rebuild from ashes, to lead. Looking back that day in the conference room when Bradley laughed feels like a lifetime ago. I was vulnerable, uncertain, on the edge of losing everything, but I held on to my values, to my vision, to the truth of who I am, and that made all the difference. Family, friends, colleagues. Many thought I was taking a reckless gamble. Why risk it all for pride, they asked. Why burn bridges? Why not just take the job and prove yourself later? But sometimes the hardest fight isn't the external battle. It's the one inside your own heart, the voice that says, do I deserve this? Am I enough? I'm telling you today, you are enough. You don't have to accept being silenced. You don't have to shrink to fit their expectations. Knowing your worth isn't arrogance. It's self-respect. It's the first step to rewriting your story. So, if you've ever been overlooked, undervalued, or dismissed, this is for you. Stand tall. Speak clearly. Build relentlessly. Because your breakthrough is waiting. And here's my question to you. Have you ever stood your ground and demanded your worth? Or maybe you wish you had shared your story in the comments below. Your voice could inspire someone who needs to hear it today. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe. Click the bell icon so you never miss a new story of triumph over betrayal and invisibility. Remember, sometimes the greatest power lies in simply refusing to disappear. Thank you for watching. This is Dr. Camila Rivera reminding you to always know your worth.